My daughter died 7 years ago. From that day on, I lived like a breathing corpse. My wife didn't last long either. 6 months after the funeral, the grief crushed her. She couldn't carry the weight of losing our only child. After that, the only family I had left was my 7-year-old granddaughter, Lena, and my son-in-law, Smith. For 7 straight years, I sent Smith $40,000 every year, no questions asked. In my mind, it was the last responsibility I had as a father to make sure Lena was taken care of, to preserve some small piece of decency in a family that had already been shattered. I never asked for receipts, never demanded updates. I just told myself the money was helping my granddaughter grow up safe. Until one afternoon at the park. Lena was eating ice cream beside me when she suddenly grabbed my arm. Her face went pale like she'd just seen something from a nightmare. Then she leaned close and whispered something that made my heart turn cold. "Grandpa, please stop sending Daddy money. If you come to the house, you'll understand why. I'm not telling this story so you can listen for a moment and scroll past like it's just another piece of entertainment. I'm telling it because sometimes the things that look the most proper, the most normal, are hiding the dirtiest truth of all. If you're watching from the United States or from anywhere in the world, drop a comment and tell me where you're from so I can greet you properly. And listen carefully to this. Some details in this story may be adjusted or slightly fictionalized to protect identities and make the lesson clearer. But the lesson itself is real enough to slap you in the face. Don't hand over money. Don't trust people blindly just because you're afraid to face the truth. When you're afraid of the truth, you turn yourself into prey. And that's when I started looking back at everything Smith, Lena, and that $40,000 a year. Every small detail, every habit, every glance. My name is Stephen Harper. I'm 68 years old. After the day my daughter died, my life shrank into a single routine, taking my granddaughter Lena to the park and watching her smile just to remind myself that this family still had one reason left to keep going. Lena is only 7. She's a good kid, quiet and polite, but there's something in her eyes that doesn't belong to a child her age. The kind of look you see in kids who have already learned how to read the room, to guess whether the adults around them are about to get angry. And then there's Smith, my son-in-law. From the outside, he looks like the model man. Steady job, soft-spoken, polite. After the funeral, he took Lena to live with him. I stayed behind in an empty house, with nothing but silence and a memorial table I still can't bring myself to look at for too long. For years, I thought that was the end of the story. I believed my role was simple: send the money and stay quiet. But I was wrong, because that very silence was exactly what was about to cost me the most. That afternoon, I took Lena to the park like I always did. She ran around laughing, ice cream smeared across her lips, one of those small, peaceful moments I had clung to for the past 7 years. Then, suddenly, Lena froze. Her smile vanished as if someone had switched it off. She stared toward the parking lot, then looked back at me with wide eyes. Her small hand gripped mine so tightly it hurt. I bent down and asked gently, "Lena, what's wrong, sweetheart?" She shook her head. Her lips trembled, like speaking too loudly might bring trouble down on her. Lena leaned close to my ear and whispered in the thinnest voice, "Grandpa, please stop sending Daddy money." I went completely still. I asked again, trying to keep my voice calm. "Why? Did Daddy do something to you?" Lena swallowed hard. Her eyes darted around nervously, checking who might be watching. Then, she said something that sent a cold chill straight down my spine. "If you come to the house, you'll understand. But don't tell Daddy I told you. Daddy will get mad. Really mad." Then she tugged on my sleeve. "Let's go home, Grandpa. I'm not allowed to be late." In that moment, I understood one thing with absolute clarity. There was something inside Smith's house that made a 7-year-old child live like she was hiding from danger. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Lena's words kept replaying in my head like the ticking of a clock hammering against my temples. Stop sending the money. Daddy will get mad. A 7-year-old doesn't say things like that for no reason. A child only whispers like that when fear has been sitting inside them for a long time. That night I started replaying the past in my head, details I had ignored for years, the kind of things you push aside when you're trying to survive your own grief. Lena always glanced at the door whenever she heard a car pull up. She almost never talked about Smith. And when his name came up, her face would go still, like someone had turned her into stone. Whenever I asked about life at home, she gave short answers and quickly changed the subject. And Smith, he was always perfectly polite. The kind of polite that looks right on the surface. But it was cold, mechanical, like manners without any warmth behind them. Back then I told myself that was just his personality. Some people are quiet. Some people keep their feelings to themselves. But that night, I finally forced myself to ask the question I had avoided for 7 years. If Smith was truly a good man, then why was Lena so afraid of him? Right then, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be the clueless old man who keeps sending money and praying everything is fine. I was going to face the truth, no matter how ugly it turned out to be. The next morning, I didn't go around complaining to anyone. Complaining is what people do when they want to stay blind. I did the only thing that actually mattered. I opened the records. I pulled every bank statement I had and spread them across the table, stacking them like pieces of evidence. 7 years. Not a single year missing. Every year, the same transfer. $40,000 sent to Smith. So consistent it almost felt mechanical. The kind of consistency that looks planned. I took a pen and circled every transaction, writing down the dates beside them. When I added everything together, the total stared back at me. Arshabawan Mayuan, $280,000. My sweat, my years of work, and the trust I had willingly placed in someone else's hands. I sat there for a long time, just staring at those numbers, because one question kept clawing at the inside of my skull. If Smith was really using that money to take care of Lena, then why was Lena afraid of him like he was something dangerous? And in that moment, I realized something important. The question was no longer, should I keep sending the money? The real question was this: what exactly has my money been feeding for the past 7 years? I knew I wasn't clear-headed enough to handle this alone. Emotions can push a man into mistakes, especially an old man running on anger and guilt. So I called the only person I trusted to work with his brain instead of his feelings: Roger. Roger used to be a private investigator, the kind of guy who doesn't talk much, doesn't show off, and most importantly doesn't trust someone just because they play the role of a good man. I got straight to the point. Roger, I need your help. Something's not right with Smith. Lena's afraid of him. And I just checked my records, 7 years, $40,000 every year. I want to know where that money's really going. Roger was quiet for a second before he answered. All right. But we do this the right way. No noise, no confrontation. If you want to bring down a dishonest man, you need evidence. We set the plan right there on the phone. Roger would start quietly tracking Smith's daily routine. I would keep Lena safe and act completely normal so Smith wouldn't suspect anything. And any unusual detail, anything at all, we'd record it. No guessing, no emotional reactions, just facts. Because once you start digging for the truth, you either find nothing or you uncover something far worse than you ever expected. From that moment on, I wasn't the old man sending money and hoping for the best anymore. I started hunting the truth. That night, I stood in front of my daughter's urn. For 7 years, it had sat on that shelf like a sentence hanging over my life. I never dared question it, because questioning it would mean admitting something far worse, that I might have believed the wrong thing. But Lena's words kept echoing in my head. Stop sending the money. My hands trembled as I lifted the urn, not because I was afraid of ghosts, but because I was afraid of the truth. Slowly, I opened the lid. The first thing that hit me wasn't the smell of ashes. There was none of that dry, burned scent you'd expect. Instead, there was a strange smell. Coffee, mixed with something sharp, almost like cinnamon. I froze. Carefully, I poured a little of the powder into my palm. It was loose, dark brown, grainy, more like used coffee grounds than cremated remains. And in that moment, a brutal realization slammed into me. For 7 years, I had been mourning in front of a fake. I grabbed my phone and called Roger, my voice rough and barely steady. Roger, the ashes aren't right. I think my daughter might not actually be dead. The next day, Roger got to work like a machine. No judgments, no wild theories, just facts. Because when someone fakes a death, it's never just a lie. It's usually the beginning of something much darker. Roger parked a short distance from Smith's house, far enough not to attract attention, but close enough to clearly see who came and went. From the outside, Smith kept playing the role of the model father perfectly. He left for work in the morning, came home in the evening. Everything ran on a routine so neat it almost felt staged. But on the second day, something broke that rhythm. A silver sedan rolled up in front of the house. A woman stepped out, well-dressed, confident, the kind of posture that didn't look like someone just visiting. She glanced around once, then pulled out a key and unlocked the door like she owned the place. Roger held his breath and started recording. A few minutes later, Smith appeared. There was no awkward greeting, no polite distance. They stood close, exchanged a few quiet words, and walked inside together. The door closed softly, but in my head it sounded like the slam of a prison gate. Roger called me, his voice flat and calm. "Stephen, there's a woman with a key to Smith's house, and I don't think this is her first time." End quote. I wasn't stupid enough to storm over to Smith's place and start shouting. Shouting only exposes your hand. Instead, Roger and I moved to the next step, digging. Roger sent me the video of the woman unlocking the door. I watched it again and again, frame by frame. The way she walked in, the casual confidence, that wasn't someone sneaking around for an affair. That was someone who had been part of that house for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and started going through Smith's social media. Everything he posted screamed, good father, clean life, work photos, fake inspirational quotes. Every now and then he'd post a picture of Lena like she was a prop in a story about how responsible he was. But the deeper I looked, the more it smelled wrong. There were long stretches where he disappeared from social media completely, then suddenly reappeared with vague posts like, a new chapter, or, finally happy again. I went back to the bank records. $40,000 a year, like clockwork. That's not how a struggling person behaves. A struggling man asks when he needs help. But this looked like a plan. Now it's not just that Smith has a mistress. Now it's this. My money has been feeding a secret, and Lena is trapped inside that secret. At that point, I stopped trusting feelings. Feelings can lie. I needed something solid, a location, a piece of evidence, something heavy enough to smash the clean, respectable mask Smith wore as a good father. Roger kept following him, and that's when he noticed something strange. On certain days, Smith didn't drive straight home after work. Instead, he'd take a longer route out toward the edge of town. Quiet roads, fewer houses. Eventually, he'd turn into an old warehouse district, the kind of place nobody visits unless they have a reason. Roger recorded everything. The footage showed Smith pulling up to one of the older warehouses. He went inside, stayed for a while, then came back out. No boxes, no deliveries, no workers, just in and out, like someone checking on something. When I watched the video, My hands went cold, because if the urn was fake, if Lena was afraid of him, if there was a woman with a key living in his house, then that warehouse might be where Smith kept the real secret. Roger didn't sugarcoat it. Stephen, I think there's someone in that warehouse, and I think that person is directly connected to the one who's supposed to be dead. Right then I understood something. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was a hunt. On the drive toward that warehouse, I didn't feel like a 6, 8-year-old man anymore. I felt like a father who had been fooled for 7 years, like a loyal dog handing over $40,000 every year to keep a lie alive. My wife Gloria's face kept flashing in my mind. She died from grief. She died believing our daughter had turned to ashes. If that urn was fake, then what was Gloria's death? Just another price paid for Smith's dirty game? My hands tightened around the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Every instinct in me wanted to storm into Smith's house and grab him by the collar, but Roger cut through my anger like a bucket of cold water. Stephen, stay calm. If you explode now, you burn all the evidence. If you want to save Lena, if you want to expose Smith, you play this with your head, not your temper. I clenched my teeth and swallowed the rage like a burning coal, because I understood something in that moment. Because if someone was really inside that warehouse, then every minute I lost control was another minute that person stayed trapped. And Lena? She was still living under Smith's roof, afraid every single day. From that moment on, I made a quiet promise to myself. I will drag the truth into the light. And Smith will pay for every bit of it. The warehouse door creaked open with a dry, hollow click. A wave of damp air, rust, and old dust rushed straight into my face. Inside, it was dim, thin strips of light slicing across the cold concrete floor like blades. Roger stepped in first, one hand casually resting inside his jacket pocket, the way a man does when he's used to places where decent people don't usually go. I followed behind him, my heartbeat pounding like a hammer in my chest. And then I saw it. In one corner of the warehouse, someone had built a small partition with rough wooden boards and a torn tarp. It didn't look like storage. It looked like a nest. An old folding bed, a few water bottles, boxes of food, a flashlight. I stopped cold. My throat tightened. Then the tarp moved. A woman stepped out from behind it, thin, pale, her eyes wide and frantic, like an animal that had been trapped for too long. She looked at me, then at Roger, and took a small step back, like she was afraid someone might drag her back into the dark. I couldn't breathe, because in that instant I recognized her face. No matter how worn down it was, no matter how tired and fragile she looked, it was still the face I had mourned for 7 years. My voice broke as I forced out the words, "Willa, is that you?" And if she said yes, then my entire life. Gloria's death. The $280,000 I had sent to Smith. All of it had been part of one filthy lie. She stared at me for a long moment, like speaking the truth might collapse the entire wall of deception around us. Then Willa let out a shaky breath, her voice hoarse and exhausted. "Dad, I'm not dead." She swallowed hard. "He's been keeping me here." I took a step toward her, but Willa raised her hand quickly, an instinctive reaction from someone who had lived too long in fear. She started telling the story slowly, each sentence sounding like it hurt to say. There had been a confrontation that night, a fight. In the chaos, she panicked and thought she had caused something terrible, something that couldn't be undone. That's when Smith showed up, but he didn't help her the way a normal person would. He took control of the situation, calm, calculated. "If you show your face," he told her, "you'll go to prison. If you tell the truth, you'll lose Lena." Then he offered what he called a solution. Disappear. Die on paper so everything could be quiet. The funeral came quickly. Closed casket. Fast cremation. Ashes handed over to the family. but they were never Willa's, and this warehouse became her prison. Smith came by on a schedule, dropping off food, water, supplies, always reminding her what would happen if she tried to run or speak, always keeping her afraid. The only thing that kept her from losing her mind was a small photograph of Lena taped to the wall. Willa looked down at that photo now, tears falling silently. I believed him. Because I was scared, she whispered. I was stupid. So stupid, Dad. Hearing that felt like someone squeezing my heart in a fist. Willa wasn't stupid. Smith was cruel, and he had written a script that turned my entire family into victims. I was still choking on everything Willa had just told me when Roger pulled me aside into a corner. His voice was low, sharp as a blade. Stephen, I've got more. He handed me his phone. On the screen were photos and video clips Smith with the woman from the silver sedan. No more guesswork now. They met regularly, stood close, walked into the house together like it belonged to both of them. And the timeline? It lined up perfectly with the time Willa had supposedly died. Roger spoke again. Every word heavy. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a tragedy. This was a script. I looked at all the pieces again, one by one. The fake urn, Lena's fear, the woman with the house key, Smith visiting the warehouse like a man checking on property, and then the ugliest truth finally came into focus. Smith staged Willa's death to erase her from the world while keeping Lena under his control. He kept Willa hidden in that warehouse to silence her, so she could never show up and ruin the story he'd built. And me? I had been the fool feeding the whole machine, $40,000 every year. 7 years straight, $280,000 flowing into his pocket to fund a new life and keep the lie alive. My jaw tightened, my eyes burning, because I realized something far worse. Smith hadn't just taken my money. He had used our grief, our funeral, our tears. He had eaten the soul out of my entire family. Every part of me wanted to smash his face the moment I saw him. But violence is the move of a weak man. You swing once, and suddenly the evidence disappears. Lena is still trapped in his house, and Willa becomes the liar he claims she is. Roger snapped me back to reality with one sentence that hit like ice water. If you want to take him down, make him say it himself. So we built the plan. Cold, clean, precise, common. No vigilante nonsense. If Smith was going to fall, it had to be with the law standing there to seal it. Roger contacted a trusted investigator through official channels and reported what it really was. A missing person being held in captivity. Willa would be taken out of the warehouse for medical care and protection. Then, at the right moment, she would come back into the picture not as a victim, but as bait. This time she wouldn't be alone. Hidden recording devices, a wire, cameras. Let Smith and his partner talk freely, believing they were still in control. All we needed was one mistake, one careless sentence about the money, about the fake death, about keeping Willa hidden. That would be enough to put handcuffs on him. I looked at Roger and said quietly, my voice hard as stone, I'm not sending Smith another dollar. A pause. This time, I'm sending him a sentence. And from that moment on, everything started moving like a trap slowly closing. She sat in the same spot as before, surrounded by the same broken boards, the same dim light, the same cold concrete. But this time, she wasn't a trembling prisoner. A small recording device was hidden on her. Outside, Roger and the officers waited in silence. No rush, no noise, just patience, waiting for one sentence that would seal everything. The warehouse door creaked open. Smith stepped in first. Right behind him was the woman from the silver sedan. Smith looked at Willa the way someone looks at a misplaced object. Annoyed, irritated. What do you think you're doing? He snapped. Trying to ruin everything? Ruin. Trying to ruin. Ruin. Trying to ruin. Willa clenched her hands but kept her voice steady. I know everything. About the fake death. About Ina. About the money my father sent. For half a second, Smith froze. Just half a second, the exact pause of a man who realizes someone has touched the one place he never wanted exposed. Then he laughed, a smug, ugly laugh. So what if you know? Who's going to believe you? You're already dead. Fun. 5-1. Another Donna. The woman beside him cut in, her voice dripping with contempt. For 7 years, we've been living pretty well thanks to that old man. Smith stepped closer to Willa, lowering his voice into a threat. As long as you stay quiet here, everything stays peaceful. But if you start talking, you'll lose Lena for good. Willa lifted her head. Her eyes were red, but her voice had steel in it now. You locked me in here like a prisoner. You took the money. You stole Lena's mother away from her. How long did you think I would stay silent? Smith's face hardened, and then he said the one sentence that sealed his fate. Until I've taken enough money and disappear from here. At that exact moment, Willa said the code word they had agreed on. Lena. 1 second later, the warehouse door burst open like thunder. Police, don't move! Flashlights swept across the dark space. Heavy footsteps rushed in. And just like that, every mask in the room shattered. Smith spun around, eyes wide. The first instinct of a guilty man is always the same: run. But run where? The exits were already covered. 2 officers moved in fast, wrenching his arms behind his back. The handcuffs snapped shut with a sharp click that sounded better than any music I'd heard in years. The woman from the silver sedan opened her mouth to argue, but the words never came out. Another officer had already secured her hands and pulled her aside. Smith started shouting, "You don't understand. She stayed here by choice." Roger cut him off cold. By choice? You kept a woman locked in a warehouse for 7 years. Save it. I stepped forward and looked straight into Smith's eyes. I didn't yell. I didn't swing. I just said one sentence. For 7 years, I sent you money to help my family. Today, I finally got the truth back. Behind me, Willa was standing there, shaking but no longer collapsing under fear. Because the warehouse wasn't a prison anymore. It had become the place where Smith's lies finally collapsed under the light. As they dragged him outside, the warehouse fell strangely silent. So quiet I could hear Willa breathing behind me, ragged, uneven, like someone who had just been pulled up from underwater after being held down for far too long. I turned and looked at her. She wasn't ashes on a shelf anymore. She was real. Alive. Standing in front of me, thin, exhausted, but breathing. I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around her. It wasn't some dramatic, tear-filled movie moment. It was the embrace of a father who had buried his daughter, and then, somehow, been given her back, along with a piece of his life that had been stolen for 7 long years. Willa broke down crying, and so did I. For 7 years I had tried to act strong. But the truth is, I wasn't strong. I was just trying not to fall apart. And in that moment, I finally did. Not in despair, but in relief. There was only one thought in my mind. Lena, that little girl, had spent years living under Smith's roof. Growing up in fear, listening for the sound of his car, watching every word she said. Right there, I made a promise to myself. From this day forward, Lena would finally get to live like a child. No more looking over her shoulder. No more whispering like she had done something wrong. No more fear every time a car pulled into the driveway. Money can be lost. But family? That night, I got mine back. I'm not telling you this story so you'll feel sorry for me. Pity doesn't help anyone, it only makes people weaker. I'm telling you this because life rarely destroys people as quickly as blind innocence does. For 7 years, I kept sending money because I thought it was my responsibility. But the truth is, I was buying a false sense of peace. I was afraid to question things, afraid to confront the truth, afraid to cause trouble. And that fear fed the monster named Smith. So what's the lesson? Don't trust someone just because they speak well and act convincing. Don't hand over money just to keep things quiet. And if a child like Lena has to whisper because they're afraid, then something inside that house is already very wrong. From that day on, I stopped sending money to evil. Instead, I sent something else. Justice. The only regret I carry now is that I didn't wake up sooner. Because maybe then, my wife wouldn't have died believing a lie. If you've read this far, comment, Lena. That way I know you understood the story. And remember one thing, kindness is good, but naive kindness can destroy an entire family.